The Zorathians had always been at the top. Their empire stretched across the galaxy, and their species were known for their terrifying strength, intelligence, and ruthless hunger for power. Other species feared them, and for good reason. On the barren world of Ekran 6, their troops were engaged in crushing a rebellion from a species that had dared to challenge their rule. The battle had been long, but it was over. The Zorathians stood victorious, as always. The Zorathian general Jorath stood over the lifeless bodies of the rebellious species. His dark green armor gleamed under the planet's twin suns, a symbol of the Empire's relentless might. His soldiers were laughing, boasting about their easy victory. The rebels had never stood a chance against the Zorathians, who were stronger, faster, and far more skilled in combat. The Zorathians had long ruled the galaxy through fear, and no one dared to stand against them. Jorath's mind, however, was far from pleased. Despite the victory, a nagging feeling began to settle deep in his gut. Something was wrong. His soldiers felt it too, but they didn't understand. As they moved through the remains of the battlefield, a strange, low hum filled the air, like the faintest tremor running through the planet itself. Jorath scanned the horizon. The energy readings from his wrist communicator showed nothing unusual. Yet, something in the air felt different. It wasn't the usual smell of victory, or the pride that came with another crushed rebellion. It was a feeling of uncertainty. "General Jorath," came the voice of his lieutenant, "we've received strange reports. A ship entered our territory, but it wasn't detected until it was already too close. We can't get any identification on it." Jorath's eyes narrowed. "What kind of ship?" The lieutenant hesitated. "It's human, sir." "Humans?" Jorath scoffed. "What do humans have to do with this? They're nothing but insects compared to the Zorathian might." The lieutenant remained silent, unsure whether to argue with his superior. But Jorath's mind was already racing. Humans? A species that had barely been noticed in the galaxy. They were primitive, chaotic, and small in comparison to the other races. They weren't even worth a second glance by the Zorathians. So why were they showing up now? And why were they being detected so close to Zorathian-controlled space? "Prepare the fleet," Jorath ordered. "I want a full scan of the area. If this is some kind of mistake, I want it corrected immediately." The lieutenant nodded, but Jorath could see the uncertainty in his eyes. There was something unsettling about this new development. He didn't trust it. Meanwhile, on the human side of the galaxy, Colonel Kate Armstrong sat at the head of a long table in a dimly lit command room. Her eyes flicked over the reports from her scouts as they scrolled across the screen in front of her. The Zorathians had been expanding for centuries, their reach spreading further and further into human space. Now, they were encroaching on Earth's borders. But humanity was not as defenseless as the Zorathians believed. Colonel Armstrong had studied the Zorathians carefully, understanding their tactics, their strengths, and their weaknesses. She knew that the key to defeating them was not brute force, but strategy. "Colonel, the first contact mission is ready." Her officer, Lieutenant Mark Reynolds, spoke up. "Our ships are prepared. The Zorathians won't know what hit them." Kate nodded slowly, her face stern. "We need to be cautious. The Zorathians may be ruthless, but they're not foolish. They'll expect us to fight like any other species they've conquered. We can't give them that satisfaction." Reynolds looked at her in confusion. "What do you mean, Colonel?" "We're not going to fight them the way they expect," she said, her eyes flashing with determination. "We're going to outsmart them. We'll hit them where it hurts, make them question everything they thought they knew about us." For the first time, Reynolds understood. "You're talking about guerrilla tactics." "Exactly," she replied. "We'll make them pay for every inch they try to take, and when they start to feel the pressure, we'll hit them harder." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the plan settling in. The Zorathians had no idea what they were about to face. They thought of humans as weak, insignificant creatures. They had no idea that Earth's warriors had something they never expected: ingenuity and a determination to survive. Back on Ekran 6, Joreth paced back and forth in his command center. His mind raced. The more he thought about it, the more his instincts screamed that something was coming. But what? His lieutenant returned, this time with grave news. "General, we've detected a fleet of human ships approaching from the outer rim. They've just crossed the border." Joreth clenched his fists. "Send a fleet to intercept them immediately. I want them crushed before they get any closer." The lieutenant hesitated for a moment. "General, I don't think we'll be able to stop them. The ships are unlike anything we've ever seen before. They're faster, more agile, and their weapons." Joreth turned sharply. "What are you saying? We are the apex predators. Nothing can match us. Now go, stop them." But deep down, Joreth knew. The Zorathians had never faced an enemy like this before, and for the first time in his life, he wondered if the Zorathians' reign was coming to an end. The vastness of space was silent, endless, and beautiful. But for Colonel Kate Armstrong, the quiet was the calm before the storm. The small fleet of human ships drifted through the void, their engines humming softly as they approached the Zorathian border. The Zorathians had been expanding for centuries, their empire swallowing up planets with ease. But now, humanity had crossed into their territory, and the stakes had never been higher. On the bridge of the lead ship, Endurance, Kate stood at the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic display. The red dot on the screen signaled the location of the Zorathian fleet. They had no idea the humans were coming. And that, Kate thought, was exactly what made this mission so critical. "We're closing in on the target zone," Lieutenant Reynolds reported, his voice calm but tense. "All systems are green, Colonel." Kate nodded, her focus unshaken. "Good. Maintain course, but stay under the radar. We don't want to tip them off until we're too close." Her team had studied the Zorathian tactics in great detail, knowing that these creatures relied on their overwhelming force to intimidate and crush their enemies. But humans weren't intimidated. They were prepared. They would strike first, hit hard, and leave no time for retaliation. "All ships are in position, Colonel," Reynolds added, his fingers flying over the controls. "We're ready to engage on your command." Kate took a deep breath and spoke calmly, but with authority. "All right, let's show them what humans are capable of." With a simple gesture, the Endurance and its fleet moved forward. The Zorathian fleet was still several hours away, but the element of surprise was crucial. Kate knew that if the humans waited too long, the Zorathians would detect them and bring their full force to bear. But if they acted quickly, they could take down the Zorathian flagship and disrupt the entire fleet before it even knew what hit it. As the fleet advanced, the human ships slipped past the Zorathian sensors, cloaked and silent. The Zorathians had no idea they were being watched. Kate's heart beat steadily as she watched the distance close on the digital map. It wasn't just about the victory. It was about proving that humanity could take on the strongest forces in the galaxy and come out on top. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "Colonel, we're picking up something." Kate could feel the pressure mounting, but she didn't hesitate. "Target their engines. We need to cripple the flagship before it can retreat." The human fleet focused their fire on the Zorathian flagship's engines, and the mighty vessel began to falter. The shields flickered and then collapsed under the barrage. The Endurance and its allies didn't let up, pressing the attack with everything they had. Just as the Zorathian flagship's shields gave way, a voice came over the comms from the Zorathian fleet. It was an officer, desperate. "Retreat! Retreat!" the officer yelled. "We are under attack by humans. They're too strong." Kate's heart surged with pride. This was the moment. The Zorathians had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. But just as victory seemed within reach, a larger threat emerged. Another Zorathian warship, even more massive than the flagship, appeared from the shadows of the fleet. It was a dreadnought, a weapon of destruction, and it was headed straight for the human fleet. "Colonel, we're in trouble," Reynolds said, his voice tight with tension. "That dreadnought is more powerful than anything we've ever faced." Kate clenched her fists. "Then we'll have to hit it where it hurts." The battle was far from over. The humans had made their first strike, and while the Zorathians had underestimated them at first, now the real fight had begun. But Kate Armstrong was ready. This was only the beginning. The humans were proving they had what it took to stand against the Zorathians, and this war was just getting started. The humans had done the impossible. The Zorathians, mighty and unstoppable, had been forced to retreat from the battle. The flagship was crippled, and many of their fighters were destroyed in a matter of hours. News of the humans' victory spread quickly throughout the galaxy, like wildfire. The Zorathians, once so confident, were now shaken, uncertain of their future. Colonel Kate Armstrong stood before a large holographic map in the war room of the Endurance, her eyes scanning the data. The human fleet had suffered some losses, but nothing compared to the damage they had inflicted on the Zorathian fleet. They had taken their first step toward turning the tide of this war. But Kate knew that this was just the beginning. The Zorathians would come back stronger, angrier, and more determined than ever. "We've done well," Kate said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "But this isn't over. The Zorathians will regroup and come after us with everything they've got. We need to be ready." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Mark Reynolds, stood nearby, his face grim. "The Zorathian dreadnought was just the beginning, Colonel. They're sending reinforcements, and the Zorathian fleet is getting larger by the day. If we don't hit them hard now, we might lose the advantage." Kate nodded. She knew the risks. But she also knew that if they didn't keep the pressure on the Zorathians, they would regroup and come back stronger than before. The key was to keep them on the defensive, make them feel like their entire empire was at risk. "We need to hit them where it hurts," Kate said, her voice firm. "We'll go after their supply lines and cripple their ability to fight. If we take away their resources, they'll have no choice but to retreat." The human fleet began to move toward Zorathian territory once more. Kate was determined to make this next move count. They were no longer the underdogs in this fight. Now, they were the ones on the offensive, pushing the Zorathians back and proving that humanity wasn't as weak as they had once thought. Across the galaxy, the Zorathian Empire was in chaos. General Joreth, leader of the Zorathian military, stood in a war room, his claws clenched tightly around the armrests of his chair. The humans had done more damage in one battle than any species before them. Their ability to destroy the Zorathian fleet with such precision left him speechless. "We cannot allow this to continue," Joreth growled, his voice filled with anger. "The humans have humiliated us. We must strike back with everything we have." His advisors were silent, knowing the general was not one to be easily swayed. After a long pause, one of his lieutenants spoke up. "General, the humans are small in number compared to us. If we can gather our full fleet and crush them, we can end this once and for all." Joreth turned to his lieutenant, his eyes burning with fury. "We underestimated them once. We will not make that mistake again. The humans will pay for their audacity." "We have a plan, General," another officer spoke, hoping to regain Joreth's favor. "We'll launch a surprise attack on their homeworld. Once Earth falls, the rest of their fleet will be shattered." Joreth considered the suggestion for a moment, his mind racing with possibilities. "No," he finally said. "If we attack Earth directly, we risk losing the entire fleet. We will move to intercept their supply lines, just as they did to ours. We will cut off their resources, starve them of the fuel and weapons they need to fight us." The Zorathian general had a new plan. It was brutal, ruthless, and it would strike at the heart of the humans' war effort. But it would also leave them vulnerable. The humans had shown they could fight back, but now the Zorathians would take the fight to them. The war was far from over. Back on the Endurance, Colonel Armstrong's team worked tirelessly to prepare for the next phase of their mission. The stakes were higher than ever, but they were no longer fighting on the defensive. They had learned something crucial in their first battle with the Zorathians. Humans had the ability to adapt and overcome, and that was something the Zorathians didn't expect. "We've got intel," Reynolds said, stepping into the room with a tablet in hand. "The Zorathians are gathering their fleet. They're planning to launch an attack on our supply lines. If we don't stop them, we'll be cut off from the resources we need to keep fighting." Kate's expression hardened. "We need to get ahead of them. If they cut off our supplies, the war is lost." "I've already got a plan," Reynolds said, tapping on the screen. "We can set up an ambush along the Zorathian supply route. If we hit them fast and hard, we can disable their supply ships and force their fleet to retreat." Kate thought for a moment. The Zorathians were fast and efficient, but they didn't know the human tactics the way her fleet did. This was their chance to strike again, to weaken the Zorathians even further. "Do it," she ordered. "Get the fleet in position. We're not waiting for them to come to us. We're going to take the fight to them." The human fleet mobilized quickly. This time, they were prepared. They had learned from their first engagement with the Zorathians, and now they knew how to move faster, hit harder, and escape before the enemy could retaliate. As the fleet jumped into position along the Zorathian supply route, Kate couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Humanity was no longer an afterthought in this war. They had become a force to be reckoned with, and they were ready to do whatever it took to win. The first shots were fired with deadly accuracy. Human ships swarmed the Zorathian supply convoy, attacking from every direction. The Zorathian ships, larger and slower, struggled to respond. It wasn't long before the humans disabled one ship after another, sending them drifting through space in flames. The Zorathians had been caught off guard. The ambush was a complete success, and soon their supply route was in disarray. The humans had struck fast and decisively, and now the Zorathian fleet was reeling. Their supplies were crippled, and their ability to fight back was severely weakened. Colonel Armstrong watched the chaos unfold on the screen, her heart pounding. This was the turning point. The Zorathians had underestimated humanity's ability to strike with precision, and now they were paying the price. "We've got them on the ropes," Kate said, her voice filled with quiet triumph. But this is just the beginning. The humans had struck a major blow. Their ambush on the Zorathian supply lines had left the enemy scrambling. The Zorathians had lost precious resources, and their fleet was now vulnerable. Colonel Kate Armstrong could see it in her mind's eye. The massive Zorathian ships drifting aimlessly through space, their power fading as the humans cut off their supplies. But she knew that victory was still far from certain. Her fleet had dealt a severe blow, but the Zorathians were not a species to be underestimated. They were quick to adapt, and Kate had no doubt they would strike back with a vengeance. They had no choice but to keep pressing the advantage. On board the Endurance, Kate stood before her team. Lieutenant Reynolds was beside her, staring at the display of the galaxy before them. "We've crippled their supply line, but it's only a matter of time before they regroup," Reynolds said, his voice filled with urgency. "If we don't strike again, they'll find a way to rebuild, and this will all be for nothing." Kate nodded. She knew Reynolds was right. The Zorathians had been embarrassed, but they weren't about to give up. Their pride would not allow it. "Prepare the fleet," Kate ordered. "We need to move fast. We'll hit their command centers next." She turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to all human ships. We're hitting the Zorathian heart of operations. This is our chance to end the war." The fleet, now bolstered by their victory, was eager to strike again. Kate could feel the change in the air. They were no longer running from the enemy. They were chasing them. This was a new chapter for humanity, one where they would no longer hide in the shadows of the galaxy. They were on the offensive now, and they were about to show the Zorathians what humanity was capable of. Back on Zorathian soil, General Joreth stood before his war council, fury in his eyes. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had crippled his fleet, taken out his supply lines, and left him with nothing but failure. "How could we let this happen?" Joreth roared. "We are the mightiest species in the galaxy, and yet we have been humiliated by these insignificant creatures. One of his commanders stepped forward cautiously. "General, the humans are relentless, but if we don't strike back soon, we risk losing everything. We've seen the damage they can cause when they have the advantage." Joreth slammed his fist down on the table, his anger boiling over. "I will not allow this to continue. The humans have tasted victory, and they believe they are unstoppable. We will show them that they are nothing compared to the full might of the Zorathian Empire." A silence fell over the room as Joreth's eyes narrowed. "Send out our fleet. We'll strike at their homeworld, Earth. If we wipe them out, the rest of their forces will crumble. Their pride will break, and they will fall to their knees." The plan was brutal, ruthless, and filled with the kind of aggression that the Zorathians were known for. But this time, Joreth was desperate. He couldn't afford another loss. Earth would be the final battleground. Colonel Kate Armstrong had anticipated the Zorathians' next move. She had studied them for months, analyzing their every tactic, their every move. She knew they would go after Earth. It was the heart of human civilization, and the Zorathians had no intention of leaving it alone. "They're coming," Kate said, her voice low and serious. "The Zorathians are heading for Earth." Reynolds looked at her with concern. "Are we ready? We can't let them get close. Earth is everything." Kate turned to face him, her expression steely. "We're ready, and we'll fight for it, no matter what." The human fleet quickly mobilized, ready to defend their home planet from the looming Zorathian threat. Kate was filled with a sense of purpose. This was it, the moment that would define humanity's future. If they could defend Earth and defeat the Zorathian forces here, they would prove that they could stand against any empire in the galaxy. "All ships are in position," Reynolds reported. "We'll have to engage them in the outer system. If we can delay them long enough, Earth's defenses will be ready." Kate nodded. The outer defense perimeter was key. They had to slow the Zorathians down before they could reach the planet itself. If they could do that, Earth's powerful orbital weapons would come online, and humanity's chances of survival would improve dramatically. The Zorathian fleet arrived in the outer reaches of the solar system, and the battle began. The human ships, small but agile, engaged the Zorathian dreadnoughts and battle cruisers, firing precise shots and then retreating before the Zorathians could counterattack. They used hit-and-run tactics, exploiting every weakness in the Zorathian ships. The Zorathians retaliated with brutal force, firing massive energy blasts that rocked the human fleet. The humans took heavy losses, but they were determined. They couldn't afford to back down. Earth was their home, their only home, and they would do whatever it took to protect it. "Target their engines," Kate ordered, her voice sharp. "We need to cripple their fleet before they get any closer." Her fleet concentrated fire on the Zorathian ship's engines, and one by one, the massive vessels began to falter. Their movement slowed, and their ability to fight back weakened. Kate knew they were winning, but the battle was far from over. Suddenly, a Zorathian warship appeared on the edge of the human fleet's radar. It was enormous, bigger than anything the humans had ever seen. It was the Zorathian flagship, and it was headed straight for Earth. "We have to stop it," Reynolds shouted. "If that ship reaches Earth, we'll lose everything." Kate's heart raced. The Zorathians were bringing their full might to bear, but they had one advantage. Humanity wasn't afraid. They would fight until their last breath, and they would make the Zorathians regret ever underestimating them. "This is it," Kate said, her voice steady. "Everyone, give it everything we've got. For Earth." With a final, desperate push, the human fleet attacked. The Zorathian flagship fired massive energy beams, but the humans dodged, closing in for the final strike. The battle for Earth had just begun. The humans had struck a major blow. Their ambush on the Zorathian supply lines had left the enemy scrambling. The Zorathians had lost precious resources, and their fleet was now vulnerable. Colonel Kate Armstrong could see it in her mind's eye. The massive Zorathian ships drifting aimlessly through space, their power fading as the humans cut off their supplies. But she knew that victory was still far from certain. Her fleet had dealt a severe blow, but the Zorathians were not a species to be underestimated. They were quick to adapt, and Kate had no doubt they would strike back with a vengeance. They had no choice but to keep pressing the advantage. On board the Endurance, Kate stood before her team. Lieutenant Reynolds was beside her, staring at the display of the galaxy before them. "We've crippled their supply line, but it's only a matter of time before they regroup," Reynolds said, his voice filled with urgency. "If we don't strike again, they'll find a way to rebuild, and this will all be for nothing." Kate nodded. She knew Reynolds was right. The Zorathians had been embarrassed, but they weren't about to give up. Their pride would not allow it. "Prepare the fleet," Kate ordered. "We need to move fast. We'll hit their command centers next." She turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to all human ships. We're hitting the Zorathian heart of operations. This is our chance to end the war." The fleet, now bolstered by their victory, was eager to strike again. Kate could feel the change in the air. They were no longer running from the enemy. They were chasing them. This was a new chapter for humanity, one where they would no longer hide in the shadows of the galaxy. They were on the offensive now, and they were about to show the Zorathians what humanity was capable of. Back on Zorathian soil, General Jorath stood before his war council, fury in his eyes. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had crippled his fleet, taken out his supply lines, and left him with nothing but failure. "How could we let this happen?" Jorath roared. "We are the mightiest species in the galaxy, and yet we have been humiliated by these insignificant creatures." One of his commanders stepped forward cautiously. "General, the humans are relentless. But if we don't strike back soon, we risk losing everything. We've seen the damage they can cause when they have the advantage." Jorath slammed his fist down on the table, his anger boiling over. "I will not allow this to continue. The humans have tasted victory, and they believe they are unstoppable. We will show them that they are nothing compared to the full might of the Zorathian Empire." A silence fell over the room as Jorath's eyes narrowed. "Send out our fleet. We'll strike at their homeworld, Earth. If we wipe them out, the rest of their forces will crumble. Their pride will break, and they will fall to their knees." The plan was brutal, ruthless, and filled with the kind of aggression that the Zorathians were known for. But this time, Jorath was desperate. He couldn't afford another loss. Earth would be the final battleground. Colonel Kate Armstrong had anticipated the Zorathians' next move. She had studied them for months, analyzing their every tactic, their every move. She knew they would go after Earth. It was the heart of human civilization, and the Zorathians had no intention of leaving it alone. "They're coming," Kate said, her voice low and serious. "The Zorathians are heading for Earth." Reynolds looked at her with concern. "Are we ready? We can't let them get close. Earth is everything." Kate turned to face him, her expression steely. "We're ready, and we'll fight for it, no matter what." The human fleet quickly mobilized, ready to defend their home planet from the looming Zorathian threat. Kate was filled with a sense of purpose. This was it, the moment that would define humanity's future. If they could defend Earth and defeat the Zorathian forces here, they would prove that they could stand against any empire in the galaxy. "All ships are in position," Reynolds reported. "We'll have to engage them in the outer system. If we can delay them long enough, Earth's defenses will be ready." Kate nodded. The outer defense perimeter was key. They had to slow the Zorathians down before they could reach the planet itself. If they could do that, Earth's powerful orbital weapons would come online, and humanity's chances of survival would improve dramatically. The Zorathian fleet arrived in the outer reaches of the solar system, and the battle began. The human ships, small but agile, engaged the Zorathian dreadnoughts and battle cruisers, firing precise shots, and then retreating before the Zorathians could counterattack. They used hit-and-run tactics, exploiting every weakness in the Zorathian ships. The Zorathians retaliated with brutal force, firing massive energy blasts that rocked the human fleet. The humans took heavy losses, but they were determined. They couldn't afford to back down. Earth was their home, their only home, and they would do whatever it took to protect it. "Target their engines," Kate ordered, her voice sharp. "We need to cripple their fleet before they get any closer." Her fleet concentrated fire on the Zorathian ship's engines, and one by one, the massive vessels began to falter. Their movement slowed, and their ability to fight back weakened. Kate knew they were winning, but the battle was far from over. Suddenly, a Zorathian warship appeared on the edge of the human fleet's radar. It was enormous, bigger than anything the humans had ever seen. It was the Zorathian flagship, and it was headed straight for Earth. "We have to stop it," Reynolds shouted. "If that ship reaches Earth, we'll lose everything." Kate's heart raced. The Zorathians were bringing their full might to bear, but they had one advantage. Humanity wasn't afraid. They would fight until their last breath, and they would make the Zorathians regret ever underestimating them. "This is it," Kate said, her voice steady. "Everyone, give it everything we've got. For Earth." With a final, desperate push, the human fleet attacked. The Zorathian flagship fired massive energy beams, but the humans dodged, closing in for the final strike. The battle for Earth had just begun. The battle was reaching its peak. The vast expanse of space around Earth had become a chaotic battlefield, with flashing beams of light cutting through the darkness. The Zorathian flagship loomed ahead, its massive form casting a shadow over the human fleet. Its cannons fired with deadly accuracy, each blast powerful enough to destroy an entire human ship in an instant. Yet the humans did not flinch. They had faced impossible odds before, and this was no different. Colonel Kate Armstrong stood on the bridge of the Endurance, watching the battle unfold before her. Every decision, every moment, could determine the fate of humanity. She clenched her fists, her mind focused on the task ahead. "Reynolds," she said, her voice sharp, "we need to take down that flagship. If we don't, the rest of their fleet will overwhelm us." Lieutenant Reynolds, standing beside her, nodded. "Understood, Colonel. But that ship is a fortress. It's going to take everything we've got." Kate knew that, but she also knew they had no other choice. If they didn't defeat the flagship, Earth would fall, and everything they had fought for would be lost. The Zorathians would wipe them out, and humanity would never recover. "We've come this far," she said, determination in her eyes. "We're not backing down now. All ships, target the flagship." Reynolds barked into the comms, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Everyone, focus your fire on the Zorathian flagship's engines. We have to disable it before it reaches Earth." The human fleet surged forward, small but agile ships darting in and out of the larger Zorathian dreadnoughts. The Zorathians fired back with relentless fury, but the humans' tactics were too unpredictable. Their ships moved like lightning, evading attacks while landing precise blows. Every shot aimed at the Zorathian flagship counted, and the crew of the Endurance gave it everything they had. "Colonel," Reynolds said urgently, "the Zorathians are sending reinforcements. More ships are arriving." Kate's heart sank for a moment, but she quickly regained her focus. They had to hold the line long enough for their plan to succeed. The Zorathians were bringing everything they had to bear, but they still hadn't anticipated the strength of human resolve. "Deploy the second wave," Kate ordered. "We'll push forward and use the distraction to get closer to the flagship." The second wave of human ships engaged the Zorathian reinforcements, drawing fire and creating chaos in the Zorathian ranks. With their attention divided, the remaining ships of the human fleet made their move, closing in on the flagship. On the Zorathian flagship, General Joreth watched as the humans attacked with precision and bravery. The once proud Zorathian fleet was faltering under the relentless pressure. His officers were panicking, unable to keep up with the humans' unpredictable tactics. "How can they move so quickly?" one of his commanders asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Their ships are smaller, yet they dodge everything we throw at them." Joreth clenched his teeth. "It doesn't matter how fast they are. We will crush them. The flagship is the heart of their fleet. If we hold it, we hold everything." His resolve was unwavering. The Zorethians were fierce warriors, and General Joreth would never allow a lesser species to defeat them. He gave the order to concentrate all fire on the human fleet, hoping that the overwhelming power of his flagship would break their resolve. But the humans were not afraid. They had no intention of retreating. Kate Armstrong and her fleet had made that clear from the start. The Zorethians were now fighting a battle they had not expected. "Colonel, we've breached their defenses," Reynolds shouted. "We've got a clear shot at the flagship's engines." Kate's heart raced with anticipation. This was the moment. The humans had fought tooth and nail to get to this point, and now they had the chance to end the battle once and for all. She took a deep breath, then gave the command. "Fire everything we've got," she said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. The human fleet unleashed everything it had, all weapons trained on the Zorethian flagship's engines. Plasma blasts, laser beams, and missile fire rained down on the mighty ship, striking its weak points with pinpoint accuracy. The flagship groaned under the assault, its shields flickering as the power core began to overload. The Zorethians had no answer to the relentless attack. Direct hit on their engines. Reynolds shouted, "It's working, Colonel. Their shields are down." The flagship shuddered as its engine systems began to fail, the great ship slowly losing power. Joreth watched in horror as his greatest weapon began to crumble under the assault of the human fleet. "No," Joreth roared, slamming his fist against the control panel. "We cannot let this happen." But it was too late. The human fleet, driven by the unbreakable will of humanity, had succeeded in their mission. The Zorethian flagship, once the pinnacle of their power, was now disabled, its engines in flames. Kate Armstrong stood at the helm of the Endurance, her hand steady on the controls as she watched the flagship fall. The battle was far from over, but this was the turning point. They had done the impossible. They had taken down the heart of the Zorethian fleet. But as she looked at the remaining Zorethian forces, she knew the war was still not won. The Zorethians had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back, but they would not give up so easily. The humans had only one chance now, to finish what they had started. The Zorethian fleet was breaking apart. Without their flagship, the remaining ships were lost in disarray. The once proud invaders, who had thought Earth would be their next conquest, were now fighting for survival. Colonel Kate Armstrong stood on the bridge of the Endurance, watching as the chaos unfolded in front of her. The Zorethian ships were scrambling, unable to coordinate. The humans had gained the upper hand. It was a victory, but not a final one. There was still work to be done. "Reynolds," Kate said, her voice steady, "prepare our fleet for the final push. We need to end this now before they can regroup." Lieutenant Reynolds nodded, his face grim. "Yes, Colonel, but we have to move fast. Their reinforcements are still up there. If we don't strike hard, they'll find a way to regroup and counterattack." Kate knew the clock was ticking. The humans had dealt a powerful blow to the Zorethians, but the Zorethian Empire was known for its ruthless ability to rebuild. If they gave the enemy time to reorganize, the fight would continue. This was humanity's chance to ensure it was over. "Get our fleet in position," she ordered, looking at the tactical map in front of her. "We need to push them out of our system for good." The human fleet advanced, its ships still battered but fighting with unmatched determination. Each ship, each crew member knew the stakes. Earth was their home, and they would not let the Zorethians take it. Back in the Zorethian command center, General Joreth's fury was unmatched. His flagship, the pride of the Zorethian fleet, had been destroyed. The humans had somehow, against all odds, managed to dismantle everything he had worked for. But even in the face of disaster, Joreth was not one to surrender easily. "We still have strength left," he growled. "We will not give up. Prepare the remaining fleet for one last assault. We will show the humans that they are not the only ones who can fight with desperation." Zoreth's commanders hesitated, but only for a moment. They knew the Zorethian military code: never retreat, never surrender. Even now, they had enough ships to launch a final attack. They had no choice but to fight until the very end. "We'll go down fighting," one of the commanders said, determination in his voice. "We'll give them a battle they'll never forget." Zoreth smiled, his teeth sharp. "Good. Prepare the fleet." As the human fleet closed in on the remaining Zorethian forces, Kate's heart raced. She had seen the Zorethians fight fiercely before, but this time it felt different. There was an intensity to their movements, a sense of finality in their actions. "Colonel," Reynolds said, his voice urgent, "we've detected a large fleet massing in the outer system. The Zorethians are preparing for one last strike." Kate's brow furrowed. They had anticipated some reinforcements, but this was larger than expected. The Zorethians were desperate, and desperate enemies were often the most dangerous. "All ships, brace for impact," she ordered. "This will be their last attempt to take Earth. We can't let them get any closer." The battle for Earth was not over. But Kate knew that the humans had one thing the Zorethians could never understand, something deeper than strategy or firepower. The humans had the will to fight for their home, to fight for each other. And that, she believed, was what would see them through to victory. The human fleet charged forward, weapons blazing. The Zorethian ships, despite their desperation, were formidable. They fought with an intensity that matched their leader's resolve. The battle raged on, each side exchanging blows in a storm of energy and fire. As the Endurance closed in on the largest Zorethian vessel, Kate felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the final clash. She could see the Zorethian ship, larger than any of the others, its weapons primed and ready. "We need to take that ship out first," Kate said, her eyes narrowing as she analyzed the enemy vessel. "If we don't, the rest of the fleet will overwhelm us." Reynolds looked at her, his expression resolute. "I'm on it, Colonel. We've got this." The human fleet concentrated its fire on the Zorethian flagship, firing with everything they had. Plasma beams cut through the darkness, striking the enemy ship with incredible force. The Zorethian ship's shields faltered, flickering under the barrage. "Direct hit," Reynolds called out. "Their shields are weakening." Kate felt a surge of hope. They were so close. One more push, and the flagship would be neutralized. But the Zorethians were not giving up without a fight. The flagship retaliated with a powerful energy blast that struck several human ships, sending them spiraling into space. "Stay focused," Kate shouted. "Keep the pressure on them." The human fleet responded, moving in tighter formation, coordinating their attacks to overwhelm the Zorethian ship's defenses. Kate watched, her breath steady, as the Zorethian flagship began to slow. Its engines were failing, and the once mighty ship was now limping through space. "Just a little longer," Kate whispered to herself. "We can do this." The final moments were a blur of flashing lights and bursts of energy. With a final, concentrated volley, the human fleet took down the Zorethian flagship. The enormous ship, once the symbol of the Zorethian Empire's power, exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The human fleet had done it. They had defeated the heart of the Zorethian fleet. In the aftermath of the battle, the remaining Zorethian ships began to retreat. The humans had delivered a crushing blow, and the Zorethians could no longer hold their ground. The war for Earth was over. Kate stood on the bridge of the Endurance, watching as the final remnants of the Zorethian fleet flood into deep space. The war was over, but it had come at a cost. Many lives had been lost, and the scars of the battle would remain forever. But Earth had been saved. "We did it," Reynolds said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "We really did it." Kate nodded, a weary smile crossing her face. "Yes, we did." For humanity, this victory meant more than just defeating an enemy. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where humans proved that, no matter the odds, they would always rise, always fight, always protect what was theirs. And the Zorathians had learned that lesson the hard way. The battle had ended. The Zorathians, once confident in their ability to conquer Earth, had been driven from the system. Their once mighty fleet was shattered, and the humans had emerged victorious. It was a moment of triumph, but the cost had been great. The scars of the battle were everywhere, on the ships, on the people, and in the memories of those who had fought. Colonel Kate Armstrong stood on the command deck of the Endurance, staring out into the vastness of space. Earth was safe, for now, but the war had taken its toll. The once peaceful skies were filled with the remains of destroyed ships, and the scars of battle marked the surface of the planet. The cost of this victory was heavy. "Colonel," Lieutenant Reynolds said, breaking the silence, "we've received a transmission from Earth. They'd want to speak with you." Kate straightened, pulling her mind from the memories of the battle. "Put it through," she ordered. A moment later, the face of President Natalie Howard appeared on the screen. The president's expression was one of relief, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. "Colonel Armstrong," President Howard said, her voice heavy, "you and your crew have done the impossible. You've saved Earth. We owe you everything. But I know that this victory comes with great loss." Kate nodded, her throat tight. She thought of the many lives lost during the war, the brave soldiers, the civilians caught in the crossfire. "We did what we had to do," she replied, "but we didn't do it alone. Every person in that fleet, every citizen of Earth, played a part in this victory." President Howard's gaze softened. "Still, you were the ones leading the charge, Colonel. You showed the world what humanity is capable of." Kate's heart swelled with pride, but the weight of the past days was still heavy on her. "We fought for Earth," she said, "for our homes, for our families, and for our future." The president took a deep breath, her voice strong again. "I know. And because of you, we have a future, but we must not forget the cost. We must rebuild. We must honor those we've lost." Kate's eyes briefly closed as she thought of the fallen, her crew, her friends, the faces of those she had fought beside. Those she had lost would never be far from her thoughts. But she knew that President Howard was right. It was time to rebuild. It was time to honor their sacrifices. "We will rebuild, Madam President," Kate said quietly. "We will ensure that those who gave their lives did not do so in vain." Back on Earth, celebrations erupted in cities around the globe. News of the victory spread like wildfire, and people took to the streets, cheering for the soldiers who had saved their planet. But amidst the joy, there was a sense of solemnity. The victory was bittersweet, for it had come at the cost of many lives. The world would never forget the sacrifices made during the war. Colonel Kate Armstrong, once seen as a soldier in the heat of battle, was now recognized as a hero. But she did not see herself as one. She was just a leader, someone who had done her duty. And now, her duty was to help her people heal. The days following the battle were filled with recovery efforts. The human fleet worked tirelessly to salvage what they could from the wreckage of the battle. Crews repaired the ships that had survived, while medical teams worked around the clock to tend to the wounded. Across Earth, people came together to help rebuild cities and communities torn apart by the war. But even as the world began to heal, a new challenge loomed on the horizon. The Zorathians had been defeated, but their empire had not been shattered. The galaxy was a vast place, and there were other forces out there who might seek to fill the void left by the Zorathian retreat. Kate knew that Earth's victory was only the beginning. The Zorathians had underestimated humanity's strength, but there were other challenges ahead, and humanity would have to be ready. It was time to begin the work of preparing for the future, to ensure that Earth would never again be caught off guard. "We've shown them what we can do," Reynolds said one evening as he stood next to Kate, watching the sunset from the bridge of the Endurance. "But we can't stop here. We have to be ready for whatever comes next." Kate nodded. "You're right, Lieutenant. We can't rest on our laurels. We've made it this far because we never gave up, and we need to keep that spirit alive. The Zorathians may have been the threat this time, but there will always be new challenges. Reynolds looked at her, a smile forming on his face. I know we're ready, Colonel. We've got the strength to face whatever comes our way. Kate returned the smile. Yes, we do. And that's what makes humanity so powerful. We'll keep fighting, keep pushing forward, together. In the years that followed, Earth rebuilt and grew stronger. The memory of the war was never far from anyone's mind, but it became a symbol of humanity's resilience. Earth's space exploration efforts, once limited and cautious, now expanded into the stars. Humanity had learned that it was not enough to defend the planet. It had to reach out, to explore, and to protect what was theirs. As for Kate Armstrong, she was no longer just a soldier. She became a leader, a symbol of humanity's strength and unity. And as she looked out into the stars, she knew that this was just the beginning. The future was bright, full of promise and challenges, and humanity would face them all, head-on, with courage, unity, and the unbreakable will that had seen them through the darkest days. Earth had been saved, and now humanity would reach for the stars. Back in space, the Endurance stood ready, its crew strong and prepared for whatever came next. The universe was vast, but Kate knew that humanity would never again face a challenge it could not overcome. For they were no longer just survivors. They were conquerors. And the stars would never forget the day humanity took its first steps into the galaxy.